We are exploring the history of late-night television talk shows with our guests, Steve O'Donnell, thumbing towards him now, head writer for David Letterman and Jimmy Kimmel, and Jimmy Brogan, Tonight Show head monologue writer with Jay Leno. Also with us is late-night semi-regular Jamie Alcroft. I am late-night, midday, early evening time flexible announcer Joe Cipriano. And now, three-time late-night studio audience member, Louise Palenker.
Yes.
Louise.
Welcome, Steve O'Donnell and Jimmy Brogan. Do you two know each other?
Yeah, we've crossed paths a few times.
You know,
yes, we met before, yes.
There was a Facebook, on Facebook, one young Mickey Yamashita has claimed to have made the introduction.
Oh, really?
Oh, that's
right.
Oh,
the two of you.
That's right. Yes, we met after a show. It was a Christmas show with Fred Willard,
yes,
and a bunch of other people, including Mickey.
Fred Willard.
And she said, "Oh, Steve O'Donnell's coming tomorrow night. You got to meet him." So I was so excited, and because I'm such a fan.
But you know,
as much as Letterman and
I saw
Jay.
you do stand-up live in the '90s.
Oh,
wow!
A long while back.
You were doing it.
You were
doing it live then.
Okay.
They did it live back then.
Well, I didn't watch a clip
then.
on YouTube. I'd had the two
really
drink
there.
minimum, is what I'm saying.
Oh, that's when I was making money doing stand-up.
I
Yes.
got you.
So during the whole Letterman-Leno standoff,
yes.
or the rivalry days in their rivalry days,
Right.
you two each respectively worked for Leno and Letterman, and are both from Cleveland.
Yes.
Wow.
So did you ever encounter each other? Did you have the same mall? Because that's where kids would have seen each other. Like,
Right.
he goes to my mall,
Yeah, they walk past each
But
other in
what-
Shaker Heights.
right?
Well, close. I grew up in Cleveland Heights.
Cleveland Heights.
Well, I grew
Or-
up on the tough west side.
Oh, the West.
On
the west side.
Different
95th
malls?
Street.
And there's such a rivalry between the East Side and the West Side of Cleveland.
It's like
There
Lilliput
is.
and
Really?
Lilliput,
Yeah.
right? It's like which end of the egg that you crack.
That's
That
right.
the East Siders would look down on West Siders. But if you were from Rochester or Schenectady or Buffalo, you'd go, who cares which side of Cleveland you're from? You're
That's
all
right.
there.
Right,
We're all-
exactly. It's
we're
true.
all neighbors
I'm in
here.
on that, yeah.
Yes,
Planet
we were
Cleveland.
fighting over scraps, really.
But you're
It was
both
nothing in Cleveland.
Catholic.
It was-
Did you have the same church?
Oh, there were so many dioceses.
Oh, wow.
We were St. Ignatius.
Oh, and I went to St. Ignatius High School on the West Side. So I feel I'm kind of a West
is a-
Sider myself.
Wow.
I'm sure we
Vacation
crossed paths. Like, I had sisters and brothers that worked at West Side Market. So
Oh.
you might have bought some kielbasi or some pierogies or something.
That's right. That's right. I bought a calf heart for my brother one time there.
Wow.
Oh, calf brain was for some sort of science
Greater
science
love, hath no
experiment.
sibling.
It's not a sentence I thought I'd hear today.
No, that's exactly.
No, a veal brain.
Well, we're going to be talking veal brain, sure. I would have expected to
That's
hear about.
what kids used to call me in high school.
See now,
Veal
see,
brain.
now I grew up in Youngstown. So I used to come up to Cleveland. We go to Lake Erie and snorkel for retreads.
Wow.
Well, we thought of Youngstown as
Snorkel for
the
retreads.
largest metropolitan entity in the United States that was wholly owned and operated by organized crime.
Yeah,
Yes,
there
we
you go.
were. Yes,
Yeah.
we
True.
were.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
So you're
The
all three of
Lordstown
you.
plant, some of my high school friends got jobs.
You are Ohioans.
We are
That's-
Ohioans.
yeah.
Yeah.
Buckeyes.
And Northern Ohio.
Buckeyes,
the
of
same-
course, yeah.
Same area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're going to be looking up on Wikipedia the history of late night talk shows, because we do have two
Okay.
icons of late night talk shows with
Jack
us.
Parr from Canton, Ohio.
Oh, really?
Oh, there you go. Wow. Yeah.
All right, so the history, I read the whole page, fascinating.
Yes.
So it starts out with the first show to air in a late night time slot was called Broadway Open House.
Yes.
It aired on NBC in 1950 and ended a year later after host Jerry Lester left the show, infuriated at being upstaged by his sidekick, who knows?
Yeah, I know.
Dagmar.
Dagmar. I can't work like this. I think it's his parting words.
I mean, maybe there was like a shadow being cast across him.
I get it. I see.
There were a
Because she
couple.
had
Or two
those
shoes.
big
Couple of
pointy
shadows.
boobs.
Beautiful
was when the
eyes.
pointy boobs were fashionable.
It went with the Cadillac bumpers and so on.
So what exactly was so captivating about Dagmar, other than she was voluptuous? Was she fun? Was she funny? What?
I think she
Vivacious.
has the mono name.
No, Virginia
You
Dagmar
don't need
Lewis.
much more than that.
But how does she get
like
Dagmar
Cher,
from?
like Shamu.
Yeah.
The one name.
Also casts a shadow.
Just like.
Well, no, I think she was funny.
Okay.
I think that was the thing, that she was voluptuous and outgoing, and just one of those gals
Are
that
there-
just captivated
Are
you.
there YouTube vids of
Yeah,
at
you
that
guys
time?
can look up
We should look
Dagmar.
that
I
up.
couldn't find her with Jerry Lester
yeah.
in like a knockdown.
Right. It would have been like
There's
kinescopes or
yeah.
something.
I couldn't find them feuding online, but you could find Dagmar tributes and of that things of that nature on YouTube if you want.
Daguerreotypes, I think they have.
She was someone that I never saw. I never saw her at the show, but it was a name I knew the way I knew names like Billy Solestis and
Who was in
from Mad Magazine.
Oh,
They'd make references
that's
to
funny.
Dagmar, and they'd make references to Harold Stassen and people like that.
You
And
know
I
what-
wasn't really sure who it was.
You know where Dagmar is stored in my brain is like next to Canteen Floss, or
Oh, yeah.
you know, people where it's a one name person, but I don't know exactly who
like
that is.
Angeline,
there you go. Exactly.
except with a personality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so anyone else have any Dagmar trivia?
I know she's
Where-
from a really big family.
She's from a big
I remember
family.
that because I'm ninth
Cleveland?
of 10, and she was like 8th of 12.
Oh,
so you
okay.
identified with Dagmar?
Yeah, kind of in a way. I'm glad to finally say it out loud. It's such a relief after all these decades.
Yeah, it's,
We've had
it's
an
cleansing.
intervention here. Didn't realize
Inspired
it.
by Bob Hope and a variety format, he had pioneered the first version of The Tonight Show. Tonight, starring Steve Allen, debuted in 1954 on NBC. The show created many modern talk show staples, including an opening monologue, celebrity interviews, audience participation, comedy bits, and musical performances. So, who here remembers The Tonight Show with Steve Allen?
Hands up. I'm there.
You were allowed to stay up.
Oh, really?
How did you get to stay up late enough to watch that?
Well, what year did it first air?
57, maybe?
1957, 54?
It's
Yeah.
complicated because he came back with little other shorter
Yeah, he
versions.
went-
Well,
I think
into,
that's what it might be.
He had a
Even my
prime time
middle
show.
age.
He had a prime
Yeah.
time show that he left his late night show for, and that's what I remember. That's because we could.
And I remember
stay
now
up
with
till
the
8
first
o'clock,
one,
and
his
then-
cast,
yeah.
his cast of characters like didn't Louis Nye
Right.
Oh, yeah,
used
yeah.
to, and
Hey
was
Ho,
that the
Steve
first
Arena.
show, or
Tom
would that be iterations of?
Was that the Man in the Street?
that was the
Man in the Street.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Tom Poston, Louis Nye.
Tom Poston.
Yes.
And there was one other.
There was.
Jose Jimenez?
Really?
Yes.
Oh, Bill Dana.
Bill
Bill
Dana.
Dana, yeah.
Bill Dana,
Yes.
good one.
Yeah,
Yes,
Jose.
and
Yeah, I think
Barney
he had
Fife.
a late night show of his
Let me
own.
ask-
Don Knotts.
Don Knotts
Knotts.
was the nervous guy. and
nervous
was-
guy.
He was
I met
unbelievable.
I met Don's daughter the other night. She's a stand-up comedian.
She does stand up.
Really?
Yes, yes. I've worked with her
Very
many
nice
times.
lady.
Wow,
Very nice. Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. And she doesn't talk about her dad
her
until
dad.
the end of her act, and you go, open with that.
But I mean, I kind of get why she doesn't. I kind of get that she wants to establish.
It's
But
much
get it
around.
out of the way.
I
Yeah,
have a question.
and
I
win
have a
everybody
question
over
for
right
Steve.
out of the
All right, so
gate.
Steve Allen, kind of a genius, right?
Absolutely.
So trivia,
Absolutely.
fun trivia.
Yes.
Steve Allen was a Jimmy Brogan fan.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Who is
See
he?
that.
Who isn't?
And in one of his books, he is quoted as having said, in his book Make 'em Laugh, this is what he said about Jimmy Brogan, about ad-libbing with audiences, which I guess he was recommending that one should attempt.
Crowd work.
Jim
Well,
Brogan would be a good example.
It was a short chapter.
He's very fast and witty and says fresh, inventive things.
Wow.
Not just preset cookie-cutter jokes that he's done before, but fresh lines actually based on the feedback he's getting from the audience. Now, does this mean that at
Wow.
some point in history,
From a
Steve
genius.
Allen is in the audience while you're on stage?
A couple times I worked with Steve. The first time I did a benefit with him at the Comedy Store in the main room. It was for the rape hotline. So you can imagine how hilarious that was just to start.
Yeah, that must
but the audience, and Steve was great. He was a gentleman. He was funny, and he brought along Tom Poston to do a set. And
Wow.
Tom Poston did not do stand up.
Okay.
And the women in the audience were fierce audience, maybe before fierce was even used about women in the day. And there was a woman wearing a meat dress. I remember that night because
Like
as
for
making
Lady Gaga.
a statement of maybe women were being
piece of
treated
meat.
as meat
Oh,
or
yeah.
something.
Oh,
I don't know
I
why,
see.
but
So they're activists.
but yes, definitely. So they're all there, and then Tom Poston comes out, who's not a stand-up, but decides he'll be funny. He comes out and he says, "Well, they called me to do a benefit for rape," and I said, "Ooh, I'm for rape. Why not?" And people started booing, boo, boo, and this didn't stop it. He was an actor. He was prepared for his next line, and he said, "Now, Buddy Hackett told me a joke. He said a nun is getting raped in the bushes. Boo!
Oh, my God.
Boo! And I'm emceeing the show.
dear.
So I've got to go back out there and bring the audience back after Tom Poston.
So what is it, your opening line to recover from such an event?
And now, Steve Allen. That's all I had. Yeah, it was tough. But Steve Allen was a gentleman and terrific. Yeah.
Well, I do have like a trivia question.
Yep.
Did Steve Allen write more songs than books?
Interesting.
Well, he
Well,
wrote
1,000 songs.
I've read many of his
1,000
books.
songs.
Unless you were
Got to be
acting
more
in a-
songs. Yeah.
He wrote lots of songs. He ad-libbed songs, yes, like from the newspaper, and that was his thing. So I think his songs were probably more numerous than his books.
I think he may have written like a book a day and like maybe 10 songs a day. Like I'm sure
He was very
the
prolific.
pace he was
He was
keeping up. But
prolific.
according to Wikipedia, he published 44 songs, 44 books and 7 songs.
Oh,
What?
But maybe those were his most famous songs.
Yeah. That were sure.
So you knew the answer to that question.
Well, yeah, I
before
can't
you asked
ask.
it.
Yeah,
I
you
can't
baited
ask a
us.
trivia question without just and then you guys saying to me, "What's the answer?" and then me going, I just thought it was a good question.
That's true.
I have a question for Steve. I've always heard that David Letterman was very influenced by Steve Allen.
Oh, yeah, he loved Steve Allen.
And David Letterman's audience participation things. I mean, were you working with David on that?
I heard him
And conspiring?
unambiguously utter sentences like "I love Steve Allen."
Yeah.
So, but also,
mean?
I think one of the most direct steals,
Yeah.
tributes, the various suits. You
Yeah,
know,
the
like
suits, yeah.
Steve
Yes.
Allen would cover himself
Yes.
with tea
The
bags and
Alka-Seltzer
get lowered into hot
suit.
water.
Right.
So we did.
Yes.
And I almost got
Velcro
killed
suit.
testing the Alka-Seltzer suit.
Did you test all the suits?
Oh, yes.
I tested all the suits. In fact, I should have sent you photos of that.
Wow.
Well, tell them why you almost passed out in the Alka-Seltzer
Alka-Seltzer.
suit.
It's a simple science project that I was unfamiliar with, which is if you drop a Alka-Seltzer into a glass of water and hold a match over the glass, the match goes out because the
No oxygen.
Sucks all the
the
oxygen.
carbon
Carbon
dioxide
yeah.
is absorbing all the oxygen. But anyway, I just put on the suit and they lowered me into the tank, and it seems to be really frothing. But then I realized I can't.
Wow.
breathe.
But zero stomach pain.
That's true. I was quite relaxed.
It's a great antacid. It really is.
So Letterman, when he did it on the air, they got him a little pony tank, like a scuba.
Oh,
a
sure.
scuba diver.
Protect that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
So-
sacrifice the writers.
Yeah. It's almost like being a food
Schmucks with
tester.
Underwood.
Well, you were the head writer, so you had to take responsibility for that.
Yes.
That's right, like being the sergeant major,
That's
first
right.
over the top.
That's right.
The next Tonight Show host, beginning in 1957 or so, is Jack Parr. He's a captivatingly controversial figure. He famously took on bully gossip columnist Walter Winchell, and I think it was kind of about maybe him feeling like TV was going to have the upper hand over print, and he was kind of done with people bullying people via print media, and he was going to have this platform to say, all right, I think would be a good time, when you come at the king kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I guess Walter Winchell was sort of working with the Un-American Activities Committee, or sort of on board with that mindset in that time period.
McCarthy.
Is it? Yeah, the McCarthyism, and maybe he had said something personally offensive about Jack Parr, and so Jack Parr would. I don't know. I was kind of reading through this.
Was he pulled in?
Well, it says he effectively killed Winchell's career. But
Oh, Jack Parr did.
Yeah.
Oh, that's how powerful he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he was emotional and
that's right.
passionate about stuff, and
Parr
would not
called
just do
Winchell.
comedy.
He was a whiner.
He was.
I think he was a whiner.
And when something got in his head, I think he would really ride it and ride it.
to the point where he once walked off his own show.
That's right.
He's the
Yes.
first late night host that I can remember seeing on TV, and I remember being struck how casual and conversational his tone was. He wasn't in that old-fashioned 50s and 60s
Not at all.
style. He was much. He in my head because I was quite small. I was kind of conflating John F. Kennedy and Peter Lawford and Jack Parr. They were all these kind of
Dapper,
a little more sophisticated,
classy
kind of
gents.
characters.
Yeah.
But he came out of radio, and then he did stand-up in World War II. To the troops is where he learned to do stand-up
Jack
and
Parr?
perform. Yeah,
I'll be darned.
And I learned a great lesson from his book.
Okay.
That which was if you're performing for the troops, which I did at like Fort Leavenworth and different bases, you make fun of the general. because no one else can do that.
Yeah, Bob.
And so if you make fun of the general,
You're in.
You are the funniest guy in the world.
right.
And,
Yeah.
and then
Come
you're
for the
fine.
king.
That's right.
That's like working a prison. You make fun of the warden.
Exactly.
That's exactly.
Yeah,
it.
because you're leaving. So
That's right.
like, you know.
That was the only gated community I ever performed in.
A prison.
Big Springs Penitentiary in Big Springs, Texas.
Did you really?
Yes, yeah, it was a captive audience.
Very appreciative.
You know all those
Right. Use all those jokes. Sure.
jokes, all of them.
I met
yes?
Jack Parr one time.
Oh, Jack Parr stories.
yes.
Okay, yes.
Yes,
Oh.
he came to the Tonight Show when we were in New York one time, and his dressing room door was open, and I said, "Here's my chance to thank him for that tip." So I went in just to say thank you because we really weren't allowed to go and bother the guests before the show, and
We were told that too, by the way. Louise told us not to bother you before
Today.
the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, today.
It's not advised.
but he sat and talked to me for like an hour before the show.
Really?
And just casual, yeah.
Wow.
He and his wife, and they couldn't have been more gracious and nice. And I just wanted to thank him for that thing that saved me at Fort Leavenworth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Playing to the troops.
That's
yeah.
awesome.
What a sweet story. That's
Yeah.
great.
And I've used in corporate gigs as well, make fun of the president of the company,
Yeah.
and everyone loves it.
That's why we all make fun of Louise when we're here. It's the way to go. Yeah.
It's a compliment.
Yeah.
Next comes Johnny Carson. He took over as host of The Tonight Show in 1962, and the show was renamed The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson. In the long storied history of late night television, there has been drama and rivalries. The pot really began to stir when Johnny announced his retirement. It seemed like he started sort of threatening that like way before it actually became a thing.
Yeah,
And
around
then-
negotiation time.
But in the
we would talk
meantime,
about.
Jimmy, you go on The Tonight Show a whole bunch of times, right?
With Johnny.
He gave you one of these, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, you get one of
that's
those.
what every comic wanted was that okay sign from
Yeah.
Johnny.
Yeah, this did not
that's
mean
it.
white power back then.
No,
Oh,
we
is
got
that what it
we
means
got that
now?
the first time, not the second time.
Oh, yeah.
You got
We
that
we
the first time?
Yeah.
Oh, but not the
That's why
second
we only
time.
did it twice.
Oh, really? And what happened the second time that he didn't give you the okay?
Well, it's kind of a sordid story. Jim McCauley, who booked the acts for the Tonight Show when Johnny was there, he changed. He said, "Listen, don't do that telephone bit. This is standing behind the curtain
Right before you go.
before we're introduced."
Okay.
He said, "Don't do that telephone bit. Do the Reagan thing." And so we did the Reagan thing, and of course you taped it at 5:00 in the afternoon. And the Reagan thing was about Reagan playing a video game. Oh, got you there. Oh, well, you be sorry for that. Wait till Sam Baku. And I was very excited doing Ronald, and and that was the night the Korean airliner was shot down. And so, Nightline was airing this news about the Korean airliner while the Tonight Show was showing us
Shooting.
Reagan shooting down things.
Yes.
And so that was the last time we did the Tonight Show.
I see.
Yeah.
We'll call that your Jackie Mason moment.
Wow. Well, it was just bad timing.
Yeah.
And for Macaulay to do that, just
He pulled you off because he
minutes
thought it would be a
before-
funnier bit to go with the Reagan thing over the telephone bit.
Yeah,
Now,
because he would always tell you the things to do.
Yeah.
Did he do that with you, Jimmy? I mean,
No,
No.
he said I could do. I showed him 10 minutes of material the first time,
Yeah.
and he said you can do any 5 of them.
You had free
which
rein.
was very unusual.
because you're just brilliant. That
I know
was
it's
it.
about- no,
And
I
you
had to
were
learn
using
to
a
do-
lot of Steve's stuff too.
I had to learn to do a monologue to do the show.
Exactly.
Which I had to go back and start all over again
Wow.
to learn to do the show.
Yeah.
For those
with
of you who
Johnny.
don't know,
Yes.
Jimmy's very when he's on stage, he's very audience oriented.
Crowd
really,
work.
Yes.
crowd work. That's what he does so brilliantly. And
That's what Steve Allen said, anyhow.
well,
According to Steve Allen, yeah, and he's
Well, you
written
can-
44 books.
Yeah. 7
I'm
songs.
in one of them.
You're in one. So then we get to the point where Johnny says he's about to retire.
oh boy,
He kind of teased it, and then he stayed for a few more years, and then when he said he was leaving, but it was like 2 years away, right?
No, 1 year.
1 year away.
It was
No,
1
it's
year.
in May
And
of
then-
91, and then 92 he left in May. Yeah.
And
but
thus
he had
begins.
just go back a little
Yeah.
bit. At 25 years, he was thinking of retiring. He went 30.
That's what I
but
was
at
thinking.
25, he was thinking of retiring because Seinfeld told me Jerry was doing panel with him, and Johnny leaned over to him and said, "I'm thinking of retiring."
Wow.
And talked it over with Jerry. And this is before Jerry had a TV show even.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this was probably 2 years before Seinfeld started.
Jerry seems like a good person to tell things.
Well, you'd think
He can keep a secret.
I think Johnny might have other things to talk about.
Yeah,
in the
that's
commercial.
wow,
but
that's
yes,
amazing.
Yeah.
So,
And also, I want to go back to something Jamie said, that Fred DeCordova, who was Johnny's
Yes.
producer in those days, had directed Ronald Reagan in Bedtime for Bonzo.
That's right, he did.
And stuff, and a bunch of movies. So he was really a Reagan fan
Well, yes,
and
he
friend.
was.
Yes, and
He was happy to see me.
and he told me a story about going to the White House with Reagan.
DeCordova,
and Reagan stops everything, and he says, "I want to introduce Fred DeCordova. Without Fred DeCordova, I would not be president of the United States, because had he not cast me in Bedtime for Bonzo." My acting career would not have ended, and I would not be president.
That's pretty
today.
good.
Got a huge laugh, and
That's good.
Yeah. So he was, he was a close friend of.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine what he thought. So that may have been.
You had a lot going
Yeah,
against you that night.
I did.
So, so I don't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt. But
no,
please,
I just think it's different if you try to tell a comedy team right before they come through a parted curtain. It's not. It's two people, so they have worked out the very
Timing,
careful and finessed timing between two people. So it's not like telling one comic, remove that joke, and the one comic can figure out what joke to put in its stead.
Well,
two people.
but even then, that would be hard.
Well,
Oh,
Because
of course
you're so
it would
prepared.
be. Yeah.
but
Yes.
Mac and I learned to talk to each other on stage without the audience knowing.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah. So we would,
Magic
we would give it. It's like the first time we went on a Catch a Rising Star. Bill Maher was the MC, and Bill said, "Can you do 12 minutes?" And this is the first time. I mean, we'd been in New York a day, and he said, well, "Yeah, 12 minutes." So we worked out a tight 12 minutes, and as he introduced us, we walked up on stage. He slipped me a note. He said, "Do 8."
Oh, wow.
In the note. So at one point, I had to communicate to Mac that we were cutting 4 minutes out of what we had planned to do. Wow. And that's always a challenge.
Yeah, you could just trip Mac.
Yes.
You know,
I'd
you
love
just
to
stick your
just
leg
go
out.
to a fake clip where you're just there
Right.
doing baseball signals.
The audience did not.
X-nay on the alligator joke or whatever.
So when
Yeah.
Johnny finally announces his retirement.
Oh, can I throw something in, Lise,
Yes, Jim.
before Johnny retires?
Yes, before, because we have to get.
Because
we're not-
this was 30 years.
We
We're
gotta get
skipping
this
over
guy
it in
retired.
one paragraph.
I know.
But to go back to what Jamie was talking about, when Jay Leno was doing the Tonight Show with Johnny, he's sitting there watching the monologue. Johnny's doing his monologue, and there's 3 jokes that Jay is going to do in his set.
Oh, wow.
So Jay had to cut 3 jokes before he went out there one night.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's
and that's something
tricky.
that comedians experience if you're at a club and you see someone hitting on the exact same premise that that will not get a laugh. Therefore, you just have to
it's important to watch your opening
adjust.
acts.
Of course, yeah.
Yes.
Because sometimes you have no idea why something didn't get a laugh, and then later we'll say, "Well, someone did a very similar joke." Like,
Yeah,
have
I've gone to a night of stand-up where half a dozen comics in a lineup will start out. My girlfriend just broke up with me, and you want to go. We had sympathy for the first 3 guys.
Right.
So,
you guys are going to just need to go to therapy because you guys we're done.
Apparently
Karen.
deserve it.
So you work. When do you start working for Jay Leno on his monologue?
when he started guest hosting. Actually.
Oh.
But before that, now here's something, a little trivia that you may not know, Liz.
Okay.
I worked for Letterman before that.
You did?
I did the warm-up for the 5th anniversary show. Steve, what year would that have been? Like 86 maybe? When
it would have
85
been,
or 86?
Well, the late night show debuted in 82, so it would be 87.
Oh, it's 87 then. Okay. Oh, so
And you
Then
guys
did we not cross paths then?
Mickey wasn't there to hook it up.
probably you were busy writing. You were probably working.
And you were warming up the audience.
It was in the Saturday Night Live studio.
Oh yeah, we were in 8H for a
and
while.
I don't think we had a regular warm-up person. I think
No,
Dave did
Bill
this
Wendell
warm-up.
would do a little something, and then Letterman would come out. And this was a philosophical point with him, because I worked with other hosts who said, I'm not going to come out before the show. I want the audience to react seeing me for the first time on camera.
Because that's how Johnny was.
Yeah.
He didn't want anyone to see him.
But Letterman had a style, and probably still does with his Netflix show, where he'll say a little talking with audience members, and then there'll be some inside line that he'll drop at some point during the show, and then the crowd will go crazy, and the people at home will go, "What are they?" Something about Mayopac, New Jersey, or something.
Aardvarks.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was kind of like the club comic in him. Just had to do that, where it was like a little bit of crowd work,
Yeah.
And he thought they would. I don't know if this was a neurosis or a rational caution that they would be more sympathetic with him if he came out and talked with them, in a warm, comradely manner.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe he read that in a Steve Allen book.
Or heard it in
Or
one of his
maybe
songs.
Dale Carnegie.
But
Ooh,
but
yeah.
I'll tell you how good Letterman was. I mean, I'm such a fan. I mean, we're presented as rivals, kind of, but I was such a fan of Dave's and your show. So I'm there doing the warm up, and I watch Dave do stupid pet tricks in rehearsal, and he's just unbelievably funny with the guests. Great jokes with the guests and the pets and what he's doing. So I think, oh, he's set. He's got all these jokes now in his mind when he goes out there. So in the regular show, he goes out there. The big anniversary show, it doesn't do any of those jokes he did in rehearsal.
Wow.
Does completely different jokes.
Really?
With, interacting with the people with the same questions and answers, and is even funnier. And you go, who could do that?
It could be.
I mean, that's how, what a genius
I
Dave was.
I share that admiration, but it could be frustrating sometimes. Like, you've got something to say. I think it was not only his standards, but also there was a kind of boredom that he had. Like he just wasn't that kind of professional showbiz person where he had to entertain himself as well. So he wasn't going to just do the same thing, 4 hours later.
Now, I don't know if Jay Leno knows this, but I'm about to divulge a secret here.
Okay.
Jimmy, in the DVR days, used to religiously, or
The VCR days.
yes.
Way
In the
back,
VCR days, Jimmy.
That's the Deutsche German Republic. That
in the
East Germany.
That was a little bit earlier. Yes.
Jimmy, in the VCR days, would religiously record Letterman every night.
Yeah.
And I would say, this is not the show that you work on. I'm aware. But yeah, he was a
saw
fanboy.
the show he worked
Yeah,
on.
he was a
That was
fanboy, and he would record it.
Well,
But
it was certainly true on the Letterman side, though, as well. And every writer that worked there in the 80s would aver this as fact, is that we looked forward to Leno's appearances as a guest with great joy and happiness and relief, because we go, well, at least week from Thursday we'll have a solid 2 segments.
Yeah.
Wow.
He was always killed. He was always great. He was always very, very funny. So it was solid as can be. But
Now, do you think that solid friendship and that chemistry between them just sort of heightened the rivalry when it came time to spar over who was going to get the Tonight Show?
Yeah, because I don't think they had a lot of. There was zero ill feeling before that.
But it was like
I think it might have gradually increased as there was a sense that Jay was doing a lot of guest hosting, and that Dave was kind of setting his cap on that same job. And
Yes.
But could it be that there's even more of a rivalry between your brother than there is between someone you've never known?
Well, yes, and they started out in the same
Diamond
class, more or
Store,
less.
yeah.
They were the same cohort, as they say
And
now.
admired each other.
Yeah.
Because Jay was really the stronger stand-up.
And I
in
think
those
took
days.
things from each other. Some of the tones of voice they got from each other.
Because they came of age
there's
together.
a dream come true. You
Right.
know, they both would kind of use that.
That's right.
They came of age together.
Yeah.
So I'll let you each describe. So they're both rivaling. Leno and Letterman are both.
But can I just throw something in here, Louise? Before
course.
I learned when I first came out, I did a show called Out of the Blue, which was a sitcom, which is the first thing that brought me to Hollywood. And it was on opposite 60 Minutes. And every question from the press was, you must hate 60 Minutes. And so they created a rivalry that didn't exist. And I would say to them, it's probably the best show on TV.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have a show if every show opposite them didn't fail. That's why I'm on TV now, is because they kill every other show. And
Well,
of
you
course-
had that little morally safer kind of pincushion, no?
Well, personally, I didn't say that publicly.
All right, so Johnny's retiring.
But I mean, a lot of it is that you're
create.
made into rivals because
Right.
you're opposite each other.
So Johnny's going to retire, and there's two kind of obvious next in line princes. Rival princes. Yeah. One is David Letterman, one is Jay Leno, and you each in this time period you each worked for those respective potential hosts, and they had different styles of kind of pursuing this dream that they'd had since they were boys, since they could first stay up till 11:30. They both wanted to imagine they could be the host of the Tonight Show, and that's not a dream that ever dies. So, could you describe how your boss went after it, and then maybe you could describe how your boss went after it, or at least what you were able to witness?
Well, the going after it probably entailed several different endeavors and concentrations. I think he thought by doing the show that came after Carson and doing it, causing as little trouble for Carson as possible, and doing it.
And it was a Carson production, wasn't
it? Yes. Okay. And there were many things they did to avoid any comparison to Carson. We didn't call the monologue a monologue. We called it opening remarks. He couldn't have a big band, so we had the little garage band with Paul Shaver, which were all things we would have preferred anyway. But by following the guidelines and the strictures and the parameters set by NBC and doing the kind of show that at least satisfied their requirements for year after year after year, I think he felt he was building up some kind of
equity, huh?
Yeah, something that
made sense.
Trust.
But then Jay's doing all the guest hosting increasingly. Letterman had done guest hosting, but he couldn't do it once he had his own show. So you have two separate kind of claims. They both have I put in my time. I did what was expected of me. But they had different styles. I understand executives in their sometimes simple-minded way would go, Jay seems more like a regular guy of the people, whereas Letterman's more a curmudgeon or more of a cynic, a skeptic, that kind of thing. Something that feels better later, but not earlier. And I think we should also point out that I always was struck that at the moment when this rivalry reached its peak, the Tonight Show job was beginning to sort of crumble as an ideal and as a thing to have an ambition for, because now there were other shows. Whereas for decades, the Tonight Show was really the only show. But in the years right before the Leno-Letterman thing, you had people like Arsenio causing a great sensation. That was a very popular and culturally, I don't want to say impactful, but I can't think of anything else.
It was just a really important voice, and he was tremendous at it. And so that was a wave that he rode, and then other waves were coming to shore, whereas it used to just be like these three waves were here, and for a long time those were the only waves. And then as this rivalry, begins to play itself out, the choices that viewers have begin to increase.
Right.
There's more available, there's more channels, there's more network, people are getting cable, and it's once you give a show to Chevy Chase, I think the gates are open. No, I'm just kidding you. Chevy Chase is wonderful, but you see what I'm saying? Like the number of people that can actually sit at this panel and say, "I had a talk show." That's the list gets longer and longer. Magic Johnson had a talk show, so they were giving out talk shows.
Right.
But Rick Dees had a talk show. Rick Dees,
Into the Night.
He was on the Rick Dees talk.
Pat
Sajak.
Yeah.
It's a fun trivia game.
David Brenner.
We should go around the room, and then the loser
Whoopi
is
Goldberg.
the last person who can name.
Cannot come up.
Yeah, Whoopi Goldberg had a talk show.
Chris Lemon.
Yes.
Chris Lemon had a talk show?
He took over from Rick Dees.
Oh, wow. I didn't even realize that.
At the end.
So did they still call it Into the Night?
Yep.
Huh.
That was great.
This was Jack Lemon's son. Yeah, Chris
Interesting.
Lemon.
So you were on Into the Night,
Yes.
and tell us about that show. When did that air and what network? Do you remember?
ABC.
It was ABC.
Yeah.
Because I was writing for Rick Dees during this time period.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, so he was doing radio.
Well, he was funny.
and
He was doing both.
hosting.
That was funny.
And then
He's
was
a regular Steve Allen.
Too bad they
He had
moved him off the
hosted.
show.
Rick Dees had been the host of Solid Gold.
Right.
Maybe right after Andy Gibb. So it was a primo position.
We did Solid Gold, too.
You got to meet all the dancers. It was great.
We were the regular comics on Solid Gold.
Oh, you were.
I still have the jacket, the satin jacket.
Wow. There you go. We have the Rick Dees jacket. So
We have
there
our
you
Rick
go.
Dees
There you
jackets.
go.
We'll have to compare sometime.
Yeah, we'll
they were
wear
like-
jackets someday.
Yeah.
No, ours are the best. The Rick Dees jackets are like baseball jackets. They're really
Yes.
awesome. All right, so you work on Into the Night, and what is your the comics, or was it like Thick of the Night where they had Gilbert Gottfried?
We did the news. We sat on a park bench.
Oh, yeah.
And read out of the newspaper as if we were two fellows just hanging out together, reading the newspaper. And I go, oh, look at this. This guy had a sex change operation, and because he was a woman trapped in the body of a man. And then 6 months later, he had another sex change operation because he felt like he was a man trapped in the body of a woman. And then he went back to the doctors about a year later and said, I want to change back. And they investigated him, and it just turned out he was an idiot trapped in the body of a moron.
That's a joke you could not do today.
You can't do that?
Probably not.
I know.
Yeah,
You can't do that.
And that's
that's why I
insensitive.
didn't do it.
It's true.
But we would do stuff like that, and we go, well, today's National Mental Health Day. And Mac would you stop with the mental health stuff? Would you? We'd just go kind of ballistic. So it was fun, and it was easy to do because the scripts were pasted inside the newspaper.
Oh, you didn't even have to learn your lines.
No, didn't have to learn the lines at all. But we wrote the news we did that show for about I think it only lasted about 18 weeks.
Yeah.
Probably most late night talk shows only lasted
Chevy Chase was
half
like,
a year.
but not even 2 weeks.
But you talked about
7 weeks.
Letterman's.
Was it 7 weeks?
7 weeks for Chevy, yeah.
Was
Okay.
it?
Yeah.
I did the promos for that, and wow, made a lot of money off of that.
Good.
Because they promoted the hell out of it,
Well, they had
on
to.
Fox. And they renamed the Aquarius Theater, the theater on Sunset, became the Chevy Chase
That's right.
Theater, and the big naming of it, and then boom, within 7 weeks.
So it
back
was hard
being-
to know which of these shows are going to find their footing, but it was still, you can understand why both Jay and Dave wanted The Tonight Show. That was the one they grew up on. So that
Yes, of
that
course.
was the coveted prize.
And
No matter
it sounds
what.
It sounds like David took kind of a passive stance because he was following Johnny, but Jay took a more active participation in trying to secure
Jay
the
Well,
job.
campaigned.
passive seems an odd word to apply to because I think his passion was very hot about about getting the Tonight Show job.
But Jay's more of a politician. So you have to hit the campaign trail. Jay's the guy that's going to do that.
Jay was definitely more of a team player with the network as far as going to conventions and going and
Would you call that a
every
schmoozer?
affiliate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Would he
yeah,
schmooze?
definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
But
he just loves doing stand-up.
well, he does the, and whenever he was in a town, he would go to the affiliate and do an interview.
Yeah,
and,
see,
and
that's
stuff,
very
yeah.
smart.
Which
That's very
Dave,
smart.
Yeah, Dave.
You know
just
what? I just
doesn't
wanted to
have
ask
sentiment.
a quick question. We were talking about whereas Leno, you were saying, was maybe more conversational and more real person, and Dave is a little bit more of a curmudgeon in the executives' eyes. Do you think the executives looked at them and thought of demographics? Maybe Leno's a little bit older skewing and Dave skews younger, and they were looking for an older audience, or not even come into play?
Boy, I would think they would be looking for a younger audience.
They're always
And that
looking
was
for a
the-
younger
that was
audience.
the- That
Okay.
was
If
the
you want-
gospel for decades.
If you want to know what my thought was at the time, and honestly, before planning today's show, I haven't given this a lot of thought, but at the time, I thought that they chose the safer guy.
Yeah.
And I think network executives often choose the safer thing. For example, it's easier to say no than it is to say yes. You're putting your neck out when you say yes, and you're spending a lot of money on a thing, and then, so yes is always like riskier. And I think they
You're
felt
right.
that Jay was safer and David was more dangerous.
Well, to add on to that, David spent how long on his show attacking Warren Littlefield, who was the executive of NBC.
Well, yeah, there was
way
a-
before.
there was
More often, it was just generic pinheads.
That's right. That's right. The executives, yeah. But I'll tell you something you may not know about this. There was an interview. This was, I think, in April of '91, like a month before Johnny surprisingly announced he was going to retire, because no one knew. I mean, he really surprised the affiliates, the network, everyone in May when he did.
Seinfeld knew.
Well, he was thinking about it 5 years earlier. And but there was an interview in the LA Times with Dave in April of '91, and they asked him if he would like to take over for Johnny, and he said, "Yeah, yeah, that'd be great." And Jay had a secret deal in place at that time to take over the show. You know, Jay had a very aggressive manager, Helen Kushnick, at that point. So they had a deal that they couldn't announce because they didn't want to embarrass Johnny and stuff, the network. So, so Jay had a secret deal in place. And so here's this article with Dave saying, "Oh, I'd like to do the show." And I said to Jay, "Well, you should call Dave and really, you know, he's your pal, your comedy pal, and, you know, just let him know where things stand." That did not happen.
Really?
Yeah. And I can't imagine what would have happened.
I
whether
wonder
Dave
if it
would
would have
have
made that much of a difference.
I don't think it would have, because Dave would have been hurt earlier
Yeah.
than.
Did Johnny ever say who he preferred?
Clearly, Dave.
Oh, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Preferred Dave.
Yeah.
In fact,
Yeah,
Johnny
came
went
out,
on
yeah.
Dave's show. He never went on Jay's show. And famously, Jay did not thank Johnny on his first night. He was taking Helen's advice.
Yeah.
She was Kathy Bates, you know. It takes Kathy Bates to play her in a movie. So
A toned-down version.
And so, he thought, well, Helen has never steered me wrong. It's a good cop, bad cop kind of thing. And Jay's a really pleasant guy to be around. I mean, he's just a lovely guy to be around. But like Helen was running interference, and she knew how badly he wanted this, and she was going to do anything to get it for him. And then if you read the Bill Carter's book or if you watch the movie, you see that it's kind of like she busted down all the doors, and then once she was inside, she continued breaking furniture. And, she doesn't know how to switch into another gear. And I mean, did I tell that properly?
Yeah. But she also was smart, and she was charming, and she was funny. I mean, there were sides of her that you don't really see in the movie. That
Well, that's good to know.
That she, I mean, there was a reason that she was successful, and she was very aggressive and could be very loud and very angry. I said to Jay the first day I started on the show, I said, if Helen yells at me, I'll quit.
That sounds like you.
And Jay said, okay. And so he kind of kept all the writers separate from Helen. So we didn't have to deal with her at all. Yeah.
Interesting.
Because I would.
So you really didn't have to have a relationship with her, really?
Other than, it was just pleasant because I never work-wise had to deal with Helen. Yeah.
Once they turn this story into a movie, it's just so delicious that you have to take several bites. So now that we've got actors playing Jay and Dave, and of course, Kathy Bates as Helen Kushnick. And then I think there was even someone that played Jimmy.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
This is the
Rich
last
Little,
year
of course, plays Johnny.
that I'm doing the Tonight Show.
So who's it going to be? Who gets the Tonight Show?
Is it Leno or Letterman?
Six, Jay.
You know what I was doing before I met Hallie? I was working at strip clubs. I wasn't going to be on any television show. An agent told
I
me that I
can't
had
help
a
but
face.
think of Chris
that was
Elliott's
baseball
version of
Yes.
Jay Leno when he would put on a prosthetic chin and come out.
What's my beef? What's my beef?
How could a television show be worth this much?
I've watched that again on YouTube. It's so funny.
So good.
Oh, there's
You think
Kathy
you can
Bates.
pull the same manipulative with me. You're trying everybody else in this town, but you with me, and I'll you back good.
She is completely out of control.
Some princely executives.
Tomorrow,
there's Bob
NBC
Balaban
will announce
playing
that Jay
Warren
Leno
Murphy, yeah.
has been named the next host of The Tonight Show. Gentlemen, this
Dave?
is completely unacceptable.
The actor did a pretty good job.
Want you to
I
Yeah.
need to say they didn't get a lot of respect, either of the actors.
Who's that playing Dave?
A fairy godfather.
Higginson? I can't remember.
Michael.
his name.
Somebody with some power in the business.
We have worked out a career plan for David,
Oh, Treat Williams.
securing everything
Yes,
for
Michael
Dave.
Hitz,
Michael
the Godfather.
Yeah,
the-
yeah.
Everything.
He was Dave's agent. Yeah.
Oh, no, it's like Greg Kinnear.
And there's a guy playing Jay with the fake chin on.
7 to 12 million. 12.5. 12.
Well, I'll tell you something about the fake chin that the guy was wearing. There was a guy that was hired to play me for one day in the film. But that fake chin under the hot lights kept melting off. And so the guy that played me got 3 days of work, and he was thrilled. And all of a sudden,
Who played you, Jimmy?
A guy named Michael McCarthy, who is from Cleveland.
He's from Cleveland.
Jimmy, why couldn't you just play Jimmy?
Yeah.
They asked me to, and I said yes. And then they said, "Oh, we're filming all day." And
We
I said,
don't think you're
"Oh,
right
no,
for the part."
I can't leave the show. I can do it at night. And they said, "Oh no, we need a full-time guy." So Michael McCarthy, who was the Second City Improv guy from Cleveland, ended up playing me. And my grandmother's name is McCarthy.
Oh, how
So
about
it
that?
couldn't have been better.
We let the Bob Hope reference go right by without mentioning Cleveland there. So
yeah.
let's
right.
get everything
Yes.
out on the table.
Yeah,
Okay,
very
yeah.
good.
Yes. And I asked Bob about Cleveland one time when I was on stage.
Really?
Yeah.
At the Laugh Factory, and this was when Bob Hope was 1,000. I don't know. I mean, he lived to maybe
Moses.
100.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, he
Just
was.
make it.
But he was probably 97 or 98, and he had been really very deaf for a long time.
What's that?
And I made the mistake of saying from the audience, "Oh," and he was sitting right in the front row. I said, "Oh, Bob, you're from Cleveland." What? And I went, "Oh Lord!" And so it was really embarrassing here, and he couldn't hear anything.
No, he couldn't.
And
He also couldn't see, but he didn't let on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and the guy that's with him then, whenever I get a laugh, Bob would say, "What did he say?" And yelling it out. And the guy would then yell the joke back at him. He said he went to Payless Shoe Store, and so he'd be screaming the joke.
And that's something.
2 feet away from me. Yeah, so.
Well, it's a story, that's for sure.
Well, yes,
I was actually thinking of Bob Hope's latter years when you were talking about the script inside your newspaper, because our Q-Kite guy at Letterman did other NBC shows, including the Bob Hope specials. In the last years, he said, because Hope didn't want to wear glasses or anything, he said the cue cards near the end were the size of garage doors.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Well, I used to interview him like once a month or so because he had these NBC specials that kept coming on. So I go over there.
You'd go to his house.
Yeah, we'd go to his house. And he'd get a whim, like he'd get a song stuck in his head, and it was like, you couldn't Google it, and so it's like so he'd like, give me the lyrics to, and then the next thing I know, someone comes back in with like this thick, puts it in front of him. This is in the middle when I'm supposed to be interviewing him, but he's got something in his head that he needs to figure out. So she puts the script in front of him, and he starts to go, "Be sure it's true when you say
2 words on a page.
I love you." That's right.
That's something.
Well, that's what I've heard about the cue cards. Is it was like 1 word per card.
It's like that fantastic Onion headline for December 7th, 1941, where it's W.A. and then headline continued.
That's great.
All right, Steve, let's go back to the beginning of your late night days. How do you come to be employed?
I was not a stand-up or a performer like these gentlemen. I was a writer. I did freelance journalism. I did magazine articles and
Greeting cards?
I did greeting cards.
No.
I did
In Cleveland?
Industrial films. Yes, at American Greetings.
American Greetings is located in Cleveland. Yeah,
Still there.
Yeah.
Wow.
But and I did some very shabby, clumsy cartooning as well. And
that was you.
That was me.
I remember that.
But I was working in the NBC building when the Letterman show started gearing up, the late night show. I'd been a fan of the morning show, 1982. I was in their tape library. The job before I worked in the NBC tape library was at the Museum of Broadcasting, where I also did their newsletter. And which went to all the different networks, and they always thought, this is fun. This guy who's collecting all this stuff at the Museum of Broadcasting. And so I've got a job at NBC. So I was able to take a submission right to the Letterman offices and leave it on the desk there.
Wow.
And
Wow.
And what was the submission? What did you submit?
I included drawings. They were all pieces. It was nothing old. It was all meant for things that they would do on a show. I hoped and prayed it would be sort of like the morning show, and of course it was to some
Love that
extent.
morning show.
Yeah.
And got a call from a message actually from Merrill Marco.
Yeah.
that
Who was the head
"Could
writer?
you come over? Yes. Could you come over? And I was so excited that I just went directly over there. And Merrill had me in her office, and then.
She had you in her office?
No, wait a second.
That's another story.
Believe me,
That's how you got
I
the
couldn't
job.
have been happier that if she had. She calls Letterman and he goes, "How'd you get over here so fast?"
Elevator bank?
And I said, "Well, I work in the building, and I got the message, and I decided to eschew the phone call and come right over."
Yeah.
And he liked your use of the word eschew.
Yes,
Well, he said, like, "Hear that, Merrill? Eschew. We got a writer here. Gonna get our money's worth." And
That's great.
yeah, but it was the greatest thing in the world. It was that kind of moment where, like, how much do I pay you a week to work here? You know.
So you're credited with creating the top 10
No,
list?
no.
Oh, the
That
stupid
was
pet
quite
tricks?
No, nothing.
Man underneath the floorboards?
Oh no, I have a lot.
So what
of,
are the bits that you invent?
let me see. NBC Bookmobile, Ask the Big Man, some of the premises, the actual size show, reverse image show, things like that. I did work constantly on the top 10s. They were sort of based on these top 5 lists that they used to do that Jim Downey used to write for the new show, which was this short-lived sort of Saturday Night Live staffed that was like a primetime comedy show that had elements of Second City and elements of Saturday Night Live. You'd think it would have been fantastic, but for whatever reason, it did not fly in primetime. And it was one of those things like the Dana Carvey show in primetime that you think, oh, this is going to be great, and then for some reason it does not clear the tree line.
Yeah. And it was a Lorne Michaels show after he left Saturday Night Live.
Anyway,
and
but they did have an element in it that was top 10 like. And,
well, I have a fascinating piece of tape. And apparently somebody noticed that Steve O'Donnell and Conan O'Brien bore a striking resemblance to one another. Maybe that somebody was a Dick Cavett.
Oh,
and so the two youngsters appear on the Dick Cavett show, and I believe we have that clip. And
really?
We will delight you with it. So there's Dick Cavett.
This is before Conan gets his own show.
Yes, he's a writer on Saturday Night Live at this point.
Or was it Simpsons?
And
No,
you-
it was Saturday Night Live, huh? Yeah.
I think he was
And you were on Letterman at
In
this
each
point.
case,
Yes.
she comes
We
from-
wrote a car here together.
We shared a car.
We have that in common.
look at
comes
that.
from Harvard. That doesn't have to be ashamed of, and I don't want to.
But I think he was as much referring not just to our physical similarity, but to the fact that we were both Harvard Lampoon alums, which is another sub-story in late-night comedy.
Just subversive
For a
smarty
while.
pants.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Writing TV and for magazines and so on. It seems to be a surprise to a lot of people because I think still the classic popular notion of Harvard graduates isn't knee-slapping
You're a
and funny,
handsome
but
young
rather
Handsome,
kind of...
handsome
Thank
kid.
you.
And did you know Conan at that?
Yeah, we were friends already at that
Were you
point.
contemporaries?
No, he's a good
the-
deal younger.
Okay.
He made a very funny joke when I saw him at a friend's 60th birthday party recently. I said, remember we used to both, I looked more like you when I had the Kennedy-esque mop of hair, which I don't have anymore. And he said, well, you still have the Joe Kennedy glasses.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great.
So did you guys
He's a
pal
funny
around with
guy.
Dick Cavett after that taping?
No, not really. He was... He's an interesting. I don't know if he counts as late night or not, but he was. He was in that Jack Parr mold, sort of being
erudite.
yes, and wearing his knowledge on his sleeve, kind of, you know.
And a Jack Parr writer. That was his first job.
Oh, really?
And on the
Kevin's-
ABC show, Regis Philbin was his announcer, wasn't he? No,
Joey
no, that
Bishop?
was Joey Bishop.
Joey
Sorry.
That's right. Oh, that's
Sorry.
right. Yeah.
We
And
left
like
out. We
many,
can't. We have to mention Joey Bishop if we're talking about the history of late.
Oh.
Yeah.
I remember Dick's joke. He said that he ate at a Chinese German restaurant. And an hour later, he was hungry for power. I love that joke.
And he claims that was his most stolen joke, I think.
Was it?
'Cause,
yeah,
a lot of
I
comics.
bet. I
took that
bet.
from
It was-
him.
but
Yeah,
I just
good.
stole it right there. But
Yeah.
So
I
now,
did give him credit.
You gave him
But,
credit.
yeah, great
how
joke,
many
yeah.
Emmys do we have between you guys?
I think you mostly lean toward Steve on this one.
Steve, you guys would win the Emmys?
Well, I'm a 16-time loser.
There we go.
Oh, that's
So
brilliant.
I'm a 16-time not even nominated. No, we won once. We won for Best Show in 95, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's that moment. So now they both have shows. So Dave's got a show on CBS and Jay's got the Tonight Show. And then there's that moment where it looked like Dave was taking it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Hugh Grant gets himself in trouble.
Yes.
But that was a few years into
Yeah,
the
it was many
I
years
mean,
in, yeah.
Dave really dominated.
These things are
for-
sometimes more glacial than you suppose.
Right,
like I
right.
remember the first guest that we paid more than scale was Cher because we needed a good guest. Speaking of the glamorous mono names, and that was 2 or 3 years into the show. We had Alba Ballard dressing up parrots and outfits, and,
Yes.
and Brother Theodore. We had oddball guests.
Oh, yeah.
but
And
the idea that the show became. It was more of an oddity and an obscurity for the first 2 or 3 years. That things do take time, and again, the same with the shifts in power. One is tempted to say, "Oh, it was the Hugh Grant interview," and that did it. I think it was just about to turn anyway.
I think a few weeks before that, maybe that was July or something of whatever year that was, 95. And Dave had been on since 93. So Dave had won for 2 years. But I think we had tied 1 week, like in June or something, for some reason. We had tied. So it was getting closer and closer. And then the Hugh Grant thing. And then the OJ trials started. And
the Dancing Itos.
Oh, that's
and
right.
my memory of it
Yeah.
is Dave didn't think Double Murder was that funny and didn't really do much stuff on it. And I remember us dipping our toe into it in the monologues of Jay going, we can make fun of the whole circus around in the murders and then when the trial started. And so Jay was then full bore into it.
Yeah.
Before Dave.
It's an interesting topic, what the hosts will touch or not touch. Like if they know Marv Albert and he's a friend, they're not going to be. But there's other things too, like I don't know how it worked with Carson and like his ex-wives and alimony and stuff. Like you would think at first they'd be careful about it, but once a crowd goes crazy for an alimony joke, then you're going to do more. The way Letterman was very, very, whether it was tasteful or crazily private or whatever about the lady who used to keep breaking into his house.
Right.
So for several years he didn't mention it at all. But I think he made some passing reference to it at the desk once in some muttering moment and got quite a response. And then it started showing up in asides. It would be like Carson talking about the ex-wives where you thought like, oh, isn't that a painful? Well, we're getting something though. So.
Well, it's like you've created this vacuum, and then as soon as you prick it, people are starving for that because they know.
I can't believe he's going to refer to it.
Yeah. So that's what turned the tide was the OJ, thing.
So now, Jimmy, you start to work for the Tonight Show as soon as Jay gets it because you've already been working there.
Well, I was helping Jay when he was guest hosting.
Right.
And which was from 87 till 92 or maybe 86 when Jay started. I can't remember when Joan Rivers had left to do her own show and they said, we're not doing that again with one guest host. Yeah. Right. And then Gary Shandling.
I think that was 88 that Joan went to Fox.
Maybe by the time the show started.
87, 88.
Maybe by the time it started.
Yeah.
But it was Gary Shandling and Jay, and I think there were two other guys that they wanted to use also as hosts. And eventually, Gary was doing his own show and, couldn't do both. And it came down to just the permanent guest host, Jay being the permanent guest host.
So can I ask, you mentioned that the idea floated to Jay about calling Dave and telling him that he was going to have the Tonight Show personally.
Yes.
How much of a difference if Joan Rivers had called Johnny and forewarned him? Would that have made things different? Because I always thought like the Joan Rivers show should have been a much bigger thing because she was such a natural.
It was so exciting when she
strong.
guest hosted. Yeah. I remember how exciting that was because it wasn't that you didn't love Johnny. It was just going to be so different. Because Joan Rivers was like Kathy Griffin. It was like, oh, who's she going to talk about? And and it was like what you said with the divorces and the alimony and whatever. Joan was going to go there, and so you were hungry for it.
Well, but here's my thought on that.
Yeah,
which is the opposite actually of what you're saying. is it was fun. Like a really spicy meal is fun once in a while, but a steady diet of that was too much every night.
Oh, well, I felt that way about Arsenio, too, after a while, even with all the drive-in from Cleveland jokes. It was just too much it was too much form, too much repetition. It was more like a religion, like the sort of calls and response and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the thing about a late night show is that you've got to kind of like walk that line of where people want to fall asleep to night after night after night. It's a big responsibility.
Or watch the next morning. Now it's a DVR world.
Yeah.
Right.
To have someone in your living room every day or your bedroom every night, they've got to be pleasant. I mean, Johnny was... you still can go back and watch those monologues on YouTube.
You could just
and he's just comfortable.
Spend an hour.
Or appears to be. I mean, he was actually a very kind of shy guy off stage. But
the other thing, when Joan Rivers went to Fox, Fox was a network that was pulled together by UHF back when UHF channels. Yes. There weren't a lot of VHF channels, and their coverage was they didn't even have 100% coverage of the U.S. That's maybe around 70% or something like that. So up against that as well. But I like what you're saying. It is like a spicy meal to have it every once in a while, but to have it every night it was very difficult.
Too much, I think.
In jest.
But to answer your question, Steve, I think had she called Johnny and either got his blessing or he said, no, we'll make a deal with you to be the host when I retire or something. It could have been really different had she been just a tad more polite there.
I think
would have
that
changed.
I
they
think
never spoke again.
Secrets can feel like the ultimate betrayal, and so as hard as it would have been for Jay to make that phone call or for Joan, because in her book, of course, she says, "I was told I couldn't." I still think that sometimes the right thing to do is the hard thing to do, and you just have to take a deep breath and do it.
Yeah, most times the right thing to do is the hard thing to do.
Yeah.
Most times. Now, how did you meet Jay? How did you start writing for Jay? I know how Steve got in with Letterman.
I met him. I'd seen him in New York when he was back east doing like Mike Douglas was in Philadelphia, so he'd fly into New York and come into the Improv or something. So I kind of I've been introduced to him. He's going, yeah, you're the new late night guys here at the Improv, Jay. And then, but when I came out here, I was walking out of the Improv. I had just moved out here, and Jay's sitting on his motorcycle outside the Improv, and I walk out and said, hey, you're the kid with the TV show. He came out and he started talking to me, and then he was friends with Seinfeld because Jerry had come out and worked with him once at the Laugh Stop in Newport Beach and had become friends with him. And so when Jerry moved out, we'd start going up to Jay's house every night and just hanging out. And then Jay would call me and say, yeah, what do you think of this joke? Yeah, how about this joke? And then we started guest hosting. He needed more and more material. And he said, yeah, come on over. We'll play video games. And there were no video games. It was just going over
and
jokes.
Reagan was
there.
Yeah.
And then it just became a regular thing when he was guest hosting that I would go up on, he would guest host on Monday nights. Yeah, I think Monday nights.
Fridays,
he would guest host.
Mondays? Yeah.
It was Mondays, and then there was a repeat on Tuesday, and then Johnny was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I think. So every Sunday night I'd go to Jay's house. And sometimes he would do whole weeks. He was doing almost as many shows as Johnny by then. Because Johnny was doing 3 days a week. But Jay would do whole weeks plus his 1 day a week. So he was doing almost as much as Johnny by the time he took over. And then Jay asked me to join him on the show. And I said, yeah, I'll do it for 6 months just to help you out. Wow. And it turned into 9 years.
9 years.
On the show.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, so before we close, what talk shows?
And I still work with Jay every Sunday.
Yes, of course.
At the Comedy and Magic Club. I mean, we're still pals after all these years.
You don't work on the Monster Garage. What's the name of his show?
Jay Leno's Garage.
Jay Leno's Garage.
Yeah.
But that's a great tradition, you going down to the Comedy Magic Club, which is probably one of the best comedy clubs in America, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, as far as audience is concerned.
Mike Lacey is the best.
Yeah, he's great. And the audiences are just such a great read. I think, you discovered that, and that's why Jay tried out his monologues there.
That's right.
Because he could test it on America. I mean, that really is a wonderful audience. I can't tell you.
Oh, it's great.
And you can back me up on that.
Absolutely.
Do you guys have the photo of Jay and Jimmy on the 405?
You guys drive together.
Broken
right,
down.
Don't you?
Yeah.
Jay picks a different car every week.
Yeah.
Well, Jimmy can tell the story.
Yes. Every week we drive down one of Jay's collection of cars, and there we are. And so this is about a year ago. Jay says, let's take
the cord.
The 37 cord.
That's a cord.
Yeah, it's called a coffin nose cord because the front looks like a coffin.
Yeah.
But it was, and this was a car company, the Cord, that went out of business in 1937 because of reliability issues.
You can't get parts.
Yeah. And so it were broken down there, right toward we're right under the 10 freeway, which crosses that. And Jay's calling.
Kind of a busy neighborhood.
Jay's calling the garage to get help from the mechanics at the garage on how to fix this thing. And so people started posting this picture. People are stopping now. Traffic is backed up now to Seattle. The whole west, we've blocked up the whole West Coast because people are stopping. They're getting out of their cars to take pictures now. And so they post this picture on the internet, and someone says Jay Leno and Prince Charles broken down on the 405. so you can't
Jimmy
trust
would
the
wave
internet.
like this.
Miles.
You can't believe everything you read on the internet.
That's right.
And did a team of Clydesdales appear to haul your car to the nearest garage in the
Jay
nearest town?
took out a little knife, cut some wire or something,
He's
and we were
amazing.
on our way.
No, the solenoids probably.
And
Something. Yeah, I don't know what. Yeah, but we got down there. Otherwise, we would have to call the club, and they would have probably sent somebody up to.
Yeah, and you were miles from the nearest Cord dealership.
Really? Exactly.
Yes, and decades away from.
Decades away. So before we close, what late night entertainment do you enjoy, Joe Cipriano?
Currently?
Yeah. I mean, we have...
Saturday Night Live. And again, as Jamie was saying, I probably watch it more DVR'd than I do watching it live. But yeah, certainly Saturday Night Live. I'll go back. Stephen Colbert, I'll watch him. I like sampling of different ones.
Yeah, and you can do that online. All that stuff's available, and it becomes buzzworthy. What do you like to watch, Steve?
I'm a Colbert guy. I enjoy him. I worked on kind of a nascent ideas for talk shows that I thought would have been great.
Oh yeah.
I think Rosie Perez still should have a talk show because she's so chatterboxy and funny almost every syllable.
Yeah. I wonder if that would wear well. Like we were talking about Joan Rivers.
Yeah,
I wonder if that would wear well night after night. I don't know. Because she certainly is funny as a guest.
Yeah, maybe there's a kind of freneticness, but anyway, I just thought if anyone was a natural talk show host, it's her. Plus, she's had experiences that after years you wouldn't have heard all of them. You know? And similarly, in a different kind of down to earth way, Bonnie Hunt, because I just always thought people related to her. She was a registered nurse, you know, from the big family in Chicago, which is we consider kind of like a Cleveland on Lake Michigan.
I recommended her for a talk show when I had a meeting. I was
smart
done the
call.
same thing.
Well, Steve did work on a Bonnie Hunt with Holly,
show.
with our friend Holly, and
she had her own daytime talk show.
Yeah.
Yes, I worked on it for 2 years.
Oh, you did?
But she had a late night soul too.
Late night soul.
I thought it was great.
There weren't other talk shows like it. It was.
And you worked on Jimmy Kimmel.
Yes, and Kimmel again. There was a continuity there too because he was. I've never met a bigger Letterman fan. Kimmel, he was absolutely devoted. Huge. You know, he had his mom make him the jacket when he was a kid, so that it looked like the one you saw in the bumpers. And he even went into radio, which perhaps was ill-advised in the 1990s.
That's when I met him.
But he said that's what Letterman did, so that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I say because by then you could go into television. You didn't have to work. There were routes that a communications major or somebody could get into television and TV broadcasting without having to pay your dues in radio first. But he wanted to do whatever Letterman did, he was going to do.
Did I ever tell you that Gary Owens kept the letter he had received from an extremely young David Letterman?
Oh, how great.
Asking him, dear Mr. Owens, how might I go about getting into broadcasting? And he's maybe 17 when he writes this. And Gary still had it.
Wow. He did a couple of bits on the Kimmel Show, Gary Owens.
Yeah,
with the voice with the
wonderful
jokes that I didn't understand as a kid from laughing. The Margot is the friendly drown.
Yeah.
What?
He would make up words.
Yeah.
So he used to say, it's coming up today between 3.
I loved him. Yeah.
And what do you watch, Jimmy?
I watch. Well, you mentioned how I watched Letterman show religiously, and I think I've seen every single Letterman show, including the morning shows that he's ever done. Yeah, I mean, I was such a fan. But I watch every show. I tape. I've got.
How do you get? Whoa, you're busy.
Samantha Bee and John Oliver.
No, well, I don't have cable, so I don't. But I see all the broadcast ones, and I'll watch Conan online as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll watch Colbert and Jimmy Fallon. And
everyone's so good.
They're so good.
And Seth Meyers, I think, has the
Seth
best monologue.
Myers is
And
Carpool Karaoke, James Corden. Brilliant.
Late night is rich with talent right now.
So much great
fabulous.
stuff.
I actually tape most of the shows too, and or tape. Listen to me, DVR them. And I favor Colbert.
Yeah,
I
Colbert.
must admit, I love his opening, and he's. I am not a Trump fan. And neither is he. Mm-hmm. And I think he probably has the most sound skewering of the latest political scene of anybody.
He had a slow start at CBS too. It took a while to kindle,
it took
because
a while.
he dropped the character, from cable, and then it was rough.
But you have to give people, if you believe in someone, it will take Conan as an example.
Mm-hmm.
It was rough. And everyone knew how talented he was, and they were just like, just slow your roll. Yeah. He's going to get it.
Exactly.
He's never not funny.
Mm-hmm.
He just has to figure out how to do this. It's like when you go from skis to snowboarding. Just let him figure out where to place his feet.
Yeah, face plant.
Good metaphor. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. I haven't gone to skiing yet. but I'll tell you, the first night that Conan was on, we had a meeting down in Jay's dressing room after the show with the NBC executives would come down after the show. Mm-hmm. And they was talking about Conan when he came on, and they said, we got to get rid of that sidekick. It's horrible. And I said to them, that's the only thing that worked on the show. Andy Richter was the best thing. He was comfortable and funny.
I was so full of joy when he came back. When there was that period where he was away. And
absolutely.
Also, he made... I got
so
just
funny.
an aside once. They were just talking about how much makeup they wear to do a regular talk show and how the lights are bright. It doesn't look like anything to the home viewer. But Andy Richter, just off the top of his head, said, yeah, like if I go out in the hallway, anybody passes me, goes, I'm the color of a flower pot. And I thought that specific image of the flower pot. That's
We have,
very
right,
good.
Naturally
we've
funny
captured
guy.
the hue.
Yeah.
All right, well, I want to thank everyone for being with us. We're going to just forego all of our special features because it was so much fun to talk to you guys
this was awesome.
today.
Yeah,
and,
so
and-
good.
and
Thank you for having me.
it's a special occasion.
Thanks
and
for
so
coming
I
in.
want to
This will
thank
go down as a classic.
It goes down as a classic.
Yes.
The moment we hit the save
Absolutely.
button, which we plan on doing.
Are we recording?
Yeah, we
I'm going to watch this show on late night.
we should watch it back.
Yeah.
We should watch it back on late night. I want to thank Jimmy Brogan and Steve O'Donnell for joining us, and thank you Joe Cipriano and Jamie Alcroft. Thank you Dina Friedman, John Maddox, Bill
Great.
Filipiak, Thomas Hubble, and Lane McFadden. I am Louise
Yeah,
Palenker,
thanks,
and
guys.
we will see you next week with Steve Lucy. Bye bye.